It was on this really tall cliff. There's just this little shelf, sandstone shelf sticking out about that far, right? And I could see something on it. I walked over to it, and it was a piece of iron, and it was actually like an axe head, and it was wrapped in leather, sitting there. And I was like, well, that's odd. Iron and deer hide casts a spell.
Holy mackerel, that can't be aircraft. There actually is a large unidentified object circling the Earth at incredible speed.
Actually, we are very curious to know where it is you come from.
I've been looking forward to this one, and I got to say, your path is one of the more interesting ones I've heard of, from archaeologist to archaeologist at Skinwalker Ranch. How do you get there?
Well, I mean, I guess it goes back to just where I'm at and what I've been doing for my life. You know, I was born in California, Southern California, and then moved. My father wisely moved me and my family up to Utah, to Vernal, Utah, in the late '70s. You know, and then I grew up there, running around the hills, you know, trying to just adventure and do whatever I could, exploring old cabins and whatnot. And that's kind of what I did, you know. And then so I went to school there and was stomping around, you know, that area for my existence up until it was time to go to school. And then I went back to California, you know, and did that there. And then eventually, you know, ended up back in Utah again. You know, met my wife that I have now, and she's from up here. We met when I was just home for a while, and this was where we wanted to be. So I just continued doing what I did with archaeology, and just ended up back here again, doing that on the road, doing different jobs. And then for archaeology, it went from really a chance meeting, you could call it that, of Tom and Candace on the Skinwalker show at a secondhand store that's in Fort Duchesne, where Skinwalker Ranch is. And it was a really interesting chance meeting where I was coming there to help my wife load up a piece of furniture that we bought from there. And Tom showed up because Candace was filling in for someone at the store that day. And I had a hat on that Tom knew the band. It was Lucero. And he goes, I know that band. And so we just started talking, because not a lot of people know the same music. And we started talking music. And then they started talking about getting together, having a dinner or something. And then they asked if we were superstitious or anything like that. And I was like, not really. I kind of enjoy that. And then they said that they're the caretakers at Skinwalker Ranch. And I was like, and they said they had a show. And in fact, the book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, was right behind me on a book stand. And I didn't realize it. I had read that book in previous years. You know, this was 2021, I think, when we had that meeting. And we just started talking. And then, you know, Candace being an anthropologist as well as an archaeologist, I asked, you know, who's doing your archaeology there? You know, if you have a television show. They told me about the show. I hadn't seen it. And that was kind of the beginning of the conversation of coming there. Over the next few months, we had a few phone calls and text conversations of, hey, you know what, we should talk more about this. And then that turned into an invitation to come out there for dinner and drinks and talk about that. And then we did that, came out there, and then talked about the archaeology that, you know, over drinks and dinner, of what to do there. And then we made a plan to start surveying the whole property so that it was kind of cleared for archaeology. You know, the same night, an event happened that I can't really go into because we filmed about it, and I don't know if they will use it or how much I can talk about it on film. But it was kind of a mind-blowing night that things changed the night we were there. And then we left, and then again, months later, you know, started talking about archaeology there, started going there. The first time I went there, I remember just, you know, going there with Tom and Candace and another archaeological friend of mine, archaeologist, that wanted to come there too. And we started walking the place, and looking around, joking about it being skinwalking because we're just walking transects looking for artifacts, and started finding the usual things you find out there, and documenting it for them, and so that they would know what they were going to either disturb or not disturb, what sites to protect, and get an inventory for the property. It's a rare thing to get people that own private land to be open to that type of thing, unless you're actually doing a development where you need to do those kind of inventories. So the opportunity to protect the history there, I wanted to jump on that, to help them in that realm. Something I do as a profession, where I do a lot of environmental things, environmental project or construction projects, development projects, energy projects, and I help with protecting the resources, whether it's archaeology, biology, paleontology. But the opportunity is not provided a lot for private properties, and I just thought this is a chance to help them, and again to help the history, which is why I got into archaeology in the first place. So, and educate people on archaeology. So that's where that went from, and then did that for actually a couple of years off camera, surveying a good portion of the ranch itself. It's still not 100% complete. As far as the surveying go, it's a lot of ground, a lot of sites to look at and document. And then it went from there to looking at the spoils, that you saw on the show of what was coming out of the mesa. And again, that was not supposed to be what it was. That was for me to be on site to actually film about other things. There's a lot of really interesting archaeology there, just history in general at the ranch, that we have filmed about and haven't filmed about, that hasn't even been shown on the show. Just a great history. It's I've described it as a candy land for archaeology. You've got a whole bunch out there, and it's a very, very interesting area as far as the history goes in the prehistory.
Man, what I love about that is you came in, I won't say cold, but you didn't come in auditioning. You didn't seek it out. You had this chance meeting with the caretakers of the ranch on the show, and one thing led to another, and you got to do what you actually do and enjoy doing. And that's been what now, 5 years that you've been actually out there?
Yeah, I would say 4 years.
4 years
I've been out there. Yeah. I think I didn't go start surveying it until 22. I think it was sometime early 22. Conversations, we went there in 21 and started planning it. And you got to do to even go on the ranch. NDAs and everything, background stuff to get permission to go there. So it took a little effort and a little coordination before we got there. And then, again, just started walking it. But again, I, my job is to protect, the history and different environmental resources around this world. And to be able to go there and do that. And again, I never had intentions of being on the screen to do that way. I wanted to talk about things, or someone to talk about the things that we were finding there. That was pretty much it.
Well, you said something earlier when you had that chance meeting with Tom and Candace, and behind you in the store was the book, right? The Hunt for the Skinwalker, which I've read that book years ago, kind of reread it a few years back. And that book always, for whatever reason, really captivated me. But when they talk about Terry Sherman and his family from 94 to 96, when the bulk of what they're writing about their experiences, where were you? Were you in Vernal at that time?
No, I was actually in UCSB in Santa Barbara doing college, for archaeology, and working down in California at the time. that book, after it came out, again, I was in the basin at that time when that book came out, and a lot of archaeologists I worked with, we had a big crew running all over the Uinta Basin doing archaeology at that time. And the book came out and everybody was reading it and passing it around. And so I, read it, went to kind of the north part of the property once, and then just kind of forgot about it. So I really had kind of forgotten about that book and what was going on there when we had that meeting with Tom and Candace. Again, it wasn't even a thing I had thought about. In quite a few years, probably 10 years since I had thought about that.
Interesting. And let me ask you this. So growing up, running around the hills and in the Uinta Basin, did you ever or hear about phenomena or sightings or things that were unusual? Because I know it's a different world now. And I know even when Terry Sherman had this happen to him, there was maybe a newspaper article or two that people would reference. So even in the area, they might not know what was going down at the ranch. But I've talked to some other people, a scientist in particular, that said the basin had these pockets of phenomena that it wasn't just exclusive to the ranch. And I'm wondering, did you ever hear about or experience anything when you were growing up in that area?
Growing up, people always had stories about Bigfoot around me,
Okay.
right? There were Bigfoot stories, a few stories in the Uinta Mountains that people would tell me, and friends of mine that had sightings, from a distance or when they were camping or when they're up in the mountains at a party. Strange stories. Friends of mine seeing things. I never saw anything weird. I didn't know about the UFO part of it. Like the Junior Hicks UFO Utah display book. I didn't know anything about that. Junior Hicks was even my wife's science teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, so and he was, and I had no idea in let's say 2011 or 12, he was my electrician at our house in Neola. I met him. All right, he was showing me how to fix wiring in my house. I had no idea that he had written this book, that he had documented so much, and I've seen all his documentation even outside of his book. It's incredible documentation that he did for decades. And when I look at all this data, there's tons of people that my wife knows or that I know, but no, I didn't have any idea about it. I always thought about UFOs or the supernatural or Bigfoot is a very interesting thing, but I didn't think of there being this level of evidence for it, or to think of looking for that truly, like we're doing there.
Yeah. So speaking of Bigfoot, we got a chance, you and I got to talk a little bit last night, and I've did some film work and investigations in different areas of the country around that subject. And with it, like I said last night, I went in going, nothing's going to happen. and then stuff would happen. And, but also what would be associated with it would be lights, balls of light, sensations of static. And it all seemed to be not just like a large primate lurking around in the woods. If you believe, or if you believe me, or if you believe some of the people that have experienced that, out at the ranch, I know there's been a history documented in the past of like large or cryptids. In your time out there, has there been any reports of like, I know we see a lot with the rockets, we see the UAP phenomena, and is there almost like what's blocking 30 feet up, where is this anomalous, invisible structure that's pushing drones out and doing these things? What about the cryptid thing since you've been up there? Any reports since you've been up there?
Well, Caleb and Travis have a story that they told, I think, quite often about seeing something that looked like it was like cloaked, and it was some kind of creature. Other people, I think, Chris Bartell, who I know from being a guard there, he's talked about seeing things. I don't know about him seeing a Bigfoot, but people have seen figures out there. Recently, with my work there, I haven't seen anything like that out there. one day again, I'm, recording sites out there, and something did look uncannily like a footprint, but I don't deal with that really so much, and there weren't more footprints. There was one. So, but they're like, watch for these things, because there are what they're thinking is similar to a dire wolf out there, or other cryptid, not necessarily is that a cryptid, but that's out of time, where you have something that should be extinct there, or the other things they see. But Bigfoot in general, there again, there's the evidence from the book, from the Skinwalker, things being in that area, people seeing strange shadow figures, but as far as documenting the evidence that they document on Bigfoot shows, where they're out in the trees and doing that, I don't know that there's been a lot recently of finding that. But again, what those guys say they saw, right? And I've sat with them off camera, and I believe everything they say. There is some things there that would maybe consider would be something like that, maybe in a cloaked fashion.
Yeah, I've heard a number of those from Bigelow's guys. Something big crawling through a portal, like a dark figure.
Yeah, that story. Yeah,
that's wild. And you said something about finding the one footprint that to you it's like, this looks like a singular footprint with no tracks, but just one footprint. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I've got two things. Guy in Canada who's been documenting this interactions, what he says, with Sasquatch for years. He'll be in the snow, they'll turn around and there's one giant track where it wasn't there a minute ago in the snow, just one. And I was out here in Mayaca, I got a call where we have the skunk ape, right? That's the lore here. And the curator for this nature museum called me and said, hey, look, I want you to take a look at something. And so I go out there, and on the edge of the Mayaca River, it's just thick mud. And if you're walking, you need to have boots, and you're going to get stuck in the mud. But right on the bank was it looked like very large human barefoot tracks in the winter. And they were just in the mud. It looked like somebody would have just dropped them down and had them push their feet in and lift them right back up. There was no trackway leading in or out. And so she had this seminal medicine man that we were talking to, and he had a name for it. I can't remember, but he said they're the people that disappear. And when I was in the Midwest at the reservation there, the same thing, they all had a different name for it, but they all described the same quality of being able to be here and then not here, leave a track, then, no trackway in or out. But I found that, and it was kind of leading to my next questions, I found that to be interesting because of the indigenous people having stories similar to what you've experienced and at the ranch, and then the history of the indigenous warring tribes up there. Is that, I know everyone's maybe got their own opinion, but what are your thoughts about that being maybe an attraction or part of this equation? Or you being an archaeologist, do you think it's more something to do with the land and what's going on with the land, or do you think it's a collective?
I mean, regarding Bigfoot, I don't know.
No, I meant regarding just the phenomena in general, because
the phenomena in general. Is it something with the land?
Yeah,
I think that it's a hard thing to say. I deal with material evidence, right?
Yeah.
That's what I find. So I find the artifacts, what's there, and define things that way. But what I'm finding there is evidence of a long occupation there, of a lot of people being there in the past. And it's not prime real estate, right? It's not too far from a river, but it's not like the greatest location. So I feel like there is possibly, you could say there's something else drawing people there. And I don't know if I wouldn't say it's the land and the resources, right? There's something else there. And with current things we're looking into now, things that we'll actually air on the show that I can't speak of. I think that's drawing things together to where it is something. There's something there that's bringing people there, whether it is in prehistory or in historic times. There's a lot of activity at that location, as well as other locations that are, that you find over time. There's a lot of people coming to the same location, and it's not just because it's a watering hole, or a migration path, a great hunting blind to hunt. There's something else at some of these locations that's different, that is drawing people there.
So when you say drawing people there, you're saying from an archaeology standpoint, in your examination and investigation, you're finding that over hundreds of years, or can you even put a year figure on it, that people have been drawn to these same spots, even though there shouldn't be a real reason that they're drawn to those spots?
I wouldn't say hundreds. I would say thousands.
Oh,
yeah. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around as modern humans, just how much time that is.
Yeah.
But when you go to these locations, there's evidence of thousands of years, not necessarily continuous occupation, but thousands of years of it being a site, for different cultures at different time periods, which lets when you have a site that has almost continuous occupation, if you can do it that way, it really says something for that site. It's not just a hunting camp. It's a place that people went to for who knows what reason, right? You really got to dig in to see what artifacts do we have that we can define that site of exactly what we think they were doing there. And places like Skinwalker Ranch have a bigger reason to be there than just a hunting camp.
Or so the evidence would suggest, that there's an attraction.
Yeah.
That's wild. So let's get into some of the evidence. As an archaeologist, you were off camera doing what you just described, but on camera, what we've seen is some pretty weird stuff coming out of that mesa that you pulled out of the spoils. The organic material that looks almost gelatinous, like there was some kind of plant life within the rocks that may have actually been burned, and then metal fragments that, upon testing, let me know if I'm right about this, have same properties as maybe the space shuttle. And then what blew me away, and I think blows most anybody away, if I talk about the fact that I'm going to sit here and talk to you today, is ask them about the ceramic, right? Ask them about the ceramic pieces that apparently could degenerate when exposed to certain energy, and then regenerate once that energy is no longer being exposed to. What was your take on that, or what is your take on that?
So the green jelly.
Yeah,
that's an interesting one, because again, when I came there and we started doing, I started set up the screens and started looking at what was coming out of the boreholes after they'd been doing it a while. They had previously, in previous season, found the green jelly, and they said, watch out for green jelly. And I'm like, I don't really do jelly. We do hard artifacts. What's left over is bone and stone, not green jelly. So that was a really interesting thing to look for, to see if that was there and what it might be. That's really interesting. Is it reactive with the bentonites that was going in the mesa? Is it actually coming out? Is it something that is reconstituted marine, residues in there without getting in the mesa, right? Without actually opening it up and seeing exactly where it came from? You're speculating. I mean, it did date to that time. That is what it is, but exactly where it came from, you need to find those things basically in situ, in place, where right where they came from, and that's where we can really tell that story. The metal, I watched that. I was doing the survey at the time when they showed the metal, and I was looking at it, and I thought, that's that's just a weird accretion thing, probably natural. When I saw it on the television screen, when I saw it in real life under a microscope, it's got a lot more properties to it, and it is very, very interesting. The different properties, the different sides you have to it. It is an anomalous metal that you can't just identify. And that's something you do as an archaeologist. You study materials, right? And everybody's written a book on every material we know as humans, whether it's prehistoric or historic, and you have a box to set every artifact in and put a label on it and call it what it is and move on to the next one and do your counts and weights and then describe your site. Well, you have material there that does not fit in a box with that metal. A very simple, it's not a simple metal. It's not a rusty can. It's very interesting. And has a lot of interesting properties to it that, again, we'll go into more regarding the looking at the metals this next season on the show. That brings me to the ceramic. That was very interesting, and I've said this a couple times, on the Skinwalker Insiders thing and the cruise we went on, where when that showed up. So when I was doing the screening, I set up lights, black lights, screens. I'm trying to maybe find some interesting minerals coming out of there. And they said, watch for metal and watch for green jelly. And I'm like, this is going to be boring because nothing's going to come out of that mesa that's not natural. It's too deep. You're boring a tiny little hole. There's not a chance in hell you're going to find anything. And it was a little while into it. We're a few weeks into it. And then that material showed up, and 5 pieces showed up at the same time. And I said quite a few words, choice words. Nobody was around. I had cameras on me, but nobody was around. I was kind of on just being filmed. And I was sure, I was like, these guys are hazing me. They're throwing something in there to see that I'm looking at the deposits. I was seriously like, I don't know if I can go over and tell these guys that I found this in there, because this can't be in there. It can't be from inside the mesa. But I had to tell them what it was, what it looks like, what it appears to be. And everybody was blown away. I was blown away, and then they were blown away. And it was quite a moment where this is something that it was undeniable that it was not natural, that it came from inside the mesa, and identified as something that just shouldn't be in there. So we don't know, because again, the mesa is very clean. It's not a trash dump. It's not where you would think you would find anything within there. It's layers of bedrock and clays and silts. And besides the top kind of rolling off there, right? You've got the rock fall there. It's very clean. It really hasn't been massively disturbed, or there's not a lot of evidence that is evident to you as you're walking around on top, right? There's been a couple things found here or there, but if it was really occupied for a long time and had a lot of activity on it, you'd have a trash pile at the bottom of the hill, with all kinds of different things there. And it just isn't there. So I was very surprised to find that. In looking at it, put it under the XRF, saw the materials that were there, very interesting. And then when they took it off and went to Utah Valley University and put it under the scanning electron microscope. I wasn't there for that. When they came back and told me the properties and showed me the video of it, I was very, very surprised. Basically, self-healing properties of materials is a very, very recent technology that has come out, but not in history. It didn't really exist in the history books. Nobody's documented anything like that, and to have a material like that doing that is shocking. It's still currently being studied with a lot more tests, and I can't talk too much about that because, again, with the show and everything in the NDA, that I can't talk about all the other studies we're doing to define exactly what this material is we're dealing with. But that was kind of the first evidence that we're dealing with something that's a lot different than what you would normally classify as a houseware ceramic or a Denny's ware, is what we say in the field where and we know all the ceramics. There's all kinds of books on them. There's samples of them. You know what the ceramics are that are out there and what they're made of and how you make them and where they come from and where the paste comes from and all these different aspects of ceramics. Everybody already knows. So to have something where you're scratching your head is very, very interesting, and also head scratching, and it made us all lose a lot of sleep. So
that's it. And you mentioned something last night, and I appreciated you saying it. And you said it. We weren't talking about the show being scripted, but you said it'd almost be easier if it was, because it's hard for you, like the directive, describe the directive of just the act of filming the show. Like, what's it like to be there when you're doing there and you're finding ceramic or you're doing your job, but you're on camera constantly? How is that doing archaeology and knowing that, it'd be easier if you just gave me some lines to say and then let me do my archaeology, but describe that.
Yeah. So I can tell you the best part of going there and doing archaeology is when I'm not finding anything. The cameras aren't off, the stereo's on, right? I got some Sabbath playing in the background and I'm just playing in the dirt like you do when you're a little kid, right? And you're just looking for stuff. That part, when you do find something like I did in that moment, then every camera is on you and you got to say something intelligent about what you just find, and you might not know exactly what you just found, right? But you've got to have something right there, and everyone is standing around you, and that's not something that I'm used to doing. It's like no one is acting. There is no script for the show, or man, it would be a lot better. They could make it very, very interesting. Everything is real, and there's a lot of boring days where you don't find anything. I mean, I screened that stuff for weeks, and nothing came out of it, and like anything that would be interesting, there were maybe some magnetic rocks came out, right? That's a natural thing. It's interesting at a geologic level, maybe a little bit, but you would just go through whatever you need to do. And that's the same thing under the science tent and the guys walking everywhere. Everybody's working and everybody's looking for things. We capture everything, but what they see on the show is actually, you see 5% of what happens, if that. And it's the most interesting things that do happen. And again, if it was scripted, it would make sense, but none of this makes sense, right?
Yep.
You go, when you're looking at it, okay, we found this ceramic material, you found this metal, you found this green jelly, and then, a little while later, a nickel pops out, right? And all that did was piss me off. So that's all I have to say about that, because a nickel shouldn't be in an undisturbed mesa, which lets you know there was a disturbance in there at some time. And again, the picture that everybody gets to see on the show, that was my picture that I took before I touched that nickel, because I could see the patina on it, knowing it didn't come from someone's pocket, right? Because that was the first thing we did, was we went and looked everywhere in the slurry pit and everything, because you have a provenience of where it came from, right? Which in the mesa, it's a 30-foot provenience, every 30 feet, which is every joint of pipe. And then from where it came in, and then it comes down in a pit, then they suck it out into the hydrovac truck, and then they transfer it over to me, and we dump it out, and I watch it go on the screen, and then I clean everything and try to identify any artifacts. And that was that process. So we had to go over to the pit, we had to check the truck, everybody checking their pockets, but I could tell it was in the mesa for at least 40 years, if not longer, because of the patina that was on it. Looked just like the stone that came out of there. Okay. That nickel had not been in circulation for a long time.
And what was the date on that again?
1964.
And I know watching the show, can you describe what a nickel might mean to an archaeologist excavating a site?
Yeah, so we're, and again, this is something we just talked about, we're like, what is a nickel doing in there? And just an example, something you do in the field when you excavate, right? Before you backfill your unit, right? You're digging, let's say you're digging a rock shelter and you've dug 50 units out of there, 30% of the site, right? You got everything out of there, but you need to put the dirt back, right? And that's for future study. Everybody knows the site's there. It's been documented. You've got records for it. And you throw a penny usually, right? You don't have a lot of money, so you throw a penny in there. The most recent one you have, hopefully from that year, if you can, into that, and then you backfill it so that when it is dug up, if all records are lost, when they redig it, they know someone dug here. There's records of this excavation. That's all that means, right? And that is a theory. But again, until we get into Mesa and find the other million nickels in there in situ, which we're hoping for, we don't know why it was in there, but that it was in there. That's all we can really say. So that either someone, right, or a lot of someones were in the Mesa, somewhere in the Mesa, after 1964, right? It could have been 1984, could have been 1974, but not before 64. And that also is the most common nickel produced. They even produced it after 1964. They just kept minting that one. So there's more of that nickel than anything. So it's not rare. It's not something special in that realm. Besides, it marks 1964 as the earliest that nickel could have been in there. So it is a great time marker. But it doesn't give us what we need until we truly get inside the Mesa and see, how did that nickel get in here? And once we get in there, we'll be able to answer that.
Interesting. For me, I'm a knucklehead. I'm always like, why wouldn't you just blow up the whole side of the Mesa? And you're like, no, man, that's not going to happen. But from where you sit and the scans and the technology, do you think there's something large buried in that Mesa?
From the scans, things that everyone has seen so far, I don't know exactly what is in there. There's evidence of something. There's a disturbance in there. The scans come back, and the thing is that again, we can see things in the sky, right? We can look at the RF, right, on things. We can see gamma radiation, all these different sensors, right? I would say that could be anything, right? All these scans, that could be anything. It could be something natural that is being interpreted as something else. But when you pull material evidence out, when you targeted that location based on these scans, based on a legend of there maybe being a cave there, and then you actually stick a tiny little bore into the Mesa and pull out not just one, but multiple pieces of this material and a nickel and other things I'm not allowed to talk about yet.
Okay.
It's kind of mind-blowing that, yes, there is something in there. There was something going on in there. There has to have been. What it is, when it's from, I can't say till they let me get in there. Blowing it up, right, which is a really fast way of getting in there. It's also a really fast way of losing all our evidence, which sucks, right? I would love to just say, let's blow it up and go in there. But then what if what we're looking for is right under the surface, right? And we just destroyed it. Or further than that, which is something we're looking at really closely, is archaeology of deep time, right? Where you might have something that's very, very ancient, that's where these signals are coming from, right? Where you're getting signals, you're getting different ways of detecting things that there might not be a lot of residue. When you excavate an ancient site that, let's say it's 8,000 years old, you're going to have some bone and you're going to have some stone and you might have pottery, right, if it survived. you're not going to have anything that deteriorates. You're not going to have the leather. You're not going to have the flesh of anything. You're barely going to have maybe any seeds. There's just things don't survive time. And so if we go back beyond that window of, let's say, Clovis or even pre-Clovis, where we're getting to 20,000 years or even further back in time, what does survive from that time, right? And it might be a signal is what we're going to find in there. So when you look at the artifacts that we pulled them out of being in situ in the mesa. And they may have been from something that was causing these signals that we have. And if we don't get in there and open it up slowly and find them in place, we might destroy that signal, right? So Eric has said this, right, multiple times. We have to go slowly. It's like a biopsy of what we were doing, which was a biopsy. Nothing was supposed to come out of those, right? Basically, we have a positive for artifacts where we should have had negatives. They were trying to go around whatever anomaly was in there, right? They wanted to go around it. They had the signals here, but we actually hit the edge of whatever it is, right? Now, whether it's all that big or whether it's broken, right, it's like a debris field. Maybe it was something that was this big, but it's spread out now throughout that area, and that's the stuff, the data that Jan found, and that you can see with all these things they've showed on the show many times, that stuff you're seeing down the mesa is actually embedded in there, but maybe it was something smaller, and somehow we hit part of it, but we can't just identify what it is. It doesn't have a maker's mark on it, which is what you always hope for in archaeology. You hope you get that part of that plate right in the middle. So it might be a saucer, right? But it's not one made, in Denmark. I like to joke about that. There might be a saucer in there, but it's not a teacup and a saucer. But who knows? Who knows what it is? But whether it's something big. Again, information from this next show. We talk a lot about the analysis of the material that I can't talk more about. And I apologize for that, but we're not allowed to. It'll come out, I think, in a few months. Which I hated that part of it. I hated the part about finding what we found, and then it turned into 10 months of waiting to even say one word about it to anybody.
That's got to be tough.
That was grueling. It was almost like a mental prison where I could talk to who I worked with, right, at the ranch, and the production team and everybody that's within the NDA to a degree, but I couldn't talk to anybody else about it, and it was grueling. So, to be, you're the first person I've talked about it, that's recording this, it was amazing to find. But it was mind-numbing and mind-boggling and drove a lot of us crazy. I mean, even the guys that had been there for years doing it, the executive producer Jason Shook, he's from Ancient Aliens, right? He's done Curse of Oak Island. He couldn't sleep at night, right? And he's kind of versed in this kind of thing, right? Dealing with this kind of stuff. And we were all just, it blew us away that we'd actually found something that is definitive, that there is something going on in there, something in there that actually has material to it, so that it is an undeniable proof that something's in there. So,
man, I would be terrible at that. I mean, give me,
it's hard.
I can keep my mouth shut for like a week, and then
it's ridiculously hard. Yeah, it was just waiting, and then the show got pushed back. The fires happened in California.
Yep.
The show got pushed back a couple months. Sadly, Shook lost his home in California. He's the one that does all the work on the final edits of the show. So it got pushed back a couple more months. And it was grueling for everybody, just waiting for that. Luckily they put it right at the beginning. Right, right at the first. I was like, oh, thank God I don't have to wait. I think it was going to be 10 episodes.
Ooh.
Until we actually found it in the time sequence, but he put it at the beginning. And I was like, thank you for doing that.
Felt like you could.
So at that point I could talk about it and people could know we found something.
Right. Oh man. Well, now it makes me, I'm really anxious for the next season. I know you can't talk about it. I mean, I get it with the NDA, but I will ask you this. Is there anything on par with anything that you discovered? Let me rephrase that. Is there anything that you're holding your breath on and kind of can't wait for it to come out so you can talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, before we talked, I wrote a list of things I can and can't.
Yeah.
I wrote the list, and then I wrote no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. Right? Talking about the ceramic, yes, I can talk about it. Is there stuff on par? Yes. I mean, yeah, it was like the work doesn't stop on the show, right? I had 100 buckets of residue that came out of there, right? That I had already screened in the field, but you can't see it that well. I had to take it back. Homestead 1 became a laboratory, and everything was spread out, and I resorted everything at least twice, right? I water screened everything so I had it cleaner, because every piece of this matters, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that again, So there were, again, things that are definitely on par. Even, I mean, it really paints a picture this next season as to what we may have going on in there. At least more, right? Until we truly open it up and get in there, which I am like chomping at the bit to get in there. It's painting more of a picture. There were more things found that we talk about in the next season, because again, the investigation, it goes year round. There's always something going on there. The show does not capture year round.
That's,
So,
I was going to ask you that. And I know it's like, well, okay, it's cold now. It's wintertime. Let's just shut it all down. That doesn't happen then, right?
No, I was in Homestead 1. I was water screening in Homestead 1. It was strange to me. I was in Tom and Candace where, they had been staying. They're not there on the ranch anymore. And I'm in where we met in their living room, turned it into an archaeological lab, And I mean, they're sorting things, water screening them, resorting things, because the opportunity we have, this isn't just like a regular archaeological site. This is private land. Brandon can go, I'm done with the archaeology, right? He loves it. He absolutely loves every bit of history and prehistory and preserving it. But the opportunity that I have to check this stuff, and how important it is to not miss one artifact. And that's not the way you usually do it. You usually sort, and you give it so much time because you have a budget, and then you put it in a box over here, and that residue might never be gone through again. But I realize the importance of it to everyone, right? That I had to sort it 2 or 3 times to make sure every single fragment was either natural or something that we need to look closer at. And there is a pile of things that we need to look closer at. That's very interesting to me. I wish I could talk more about it because it's really cool.
No, this gives me now I'm stoked. My buddy got duped into on Facebook. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, it's premiering tonight," like these fan channels, and so he's like, "Hey, man, I just ordered History Vault. I'm going to watch the new season tonight," and I'm like, "I don't think that's accurate, dude." and he calls me back 10 minutes later. I got duped. I'm like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yeah. But I'm excited. I'm excited to watch the new season. And, the other thing I was thinking about too, a lot of people, because of the discoveries you found last season and were revealed, it gets a lot of attention, but you were also out on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch at Mount Wilson, right? Which is...
Oh, yeah. Not Beyond, even though that is the location for Beyond. Yeah, yep. Jeff McBurney, and Mount Wilson Ranch.
Yeah.
I went out there to tell him what archaeology he had out there. That was kind of an association through Skinwalker Ranch that we ran into each other. And he said, "I'd love you to come out and identify what I have out there." He has museum quality, which you can see online, museum quality archaic, mostly projectile points, spear points, ceremonial stuff that was never designed to be used, right, in warfare or anything. And more than likely were like offerings, like shamanic offerings. He even found one because I was like, are these all fake? Because they're so good, right? He found one in the dirt himself, in the meadow, in an area that is definitely likely a ceremonial location. So his site there at Mount Wilson, you've got basically a habitation site where people would have lived up on top, where his home is, where the saloon is, if you're familiar with it. Mount Wilson's fantastic. And then you go down into the meadow, and that's where the artifacts kind of start to peter off, right? But they get more selective with being more ceremonial down in that area where you got what he actually calls, and they describe as the portal location of these two stones that come together. And he found a spear point probably this long of obsidian found in that location. They look, it's very interesting that the designs of them match older, but they're probably maybe archaic. We need to get them dated to see and do some obsidian hydration. We haven't done anything with them yet, but they're gorgeous from that site. It's just really insane that he's got that going on. The interesting thing is that Mount Wilson is basically Skinwalker Ranch's sister site, right? It was owned by Bigelow, right? At the exact same time, he bought it basically at the same time period. All the same scientists went there to study it. Jeff has got really interesting stories of what he's heard there, what they've seen there, people doing like ghost hunter people come there and study it and see really incredible things. So I went there a few times, doing that with him, showing him different things he had there. And then he asked me to come there once for, was it Sam and Colby, the ghost hunter, Sam and Colby.
Yeah.
They we did a film there, which I didn't know until it was nearly over that it was a film. I thought they just wanted me to tell them what we had, show them the artifacts, talk about the sites there, talk about shamanism in the area, inform them, no, it's not Skinwalker country, that's Navajo, and that's where that legend comes from. And it was very interesting. And their film, I don't know, there's like a link to it you can get, but it was at the theaters. We did a premiere for it in Hollywood. I'm watching the movie, and it was almost, they were kids, right? They're messing around ghost stuff, and it's like you take the history and prehistory of people, and there's reverence about it. And I didn't see that. By the end of the film, it was overwhelming within them, the reverence that they gained over that time there. And the message, if I can send a link to people, because they're not putting it out. They're not putting it on Netflix, but the message that came across when they put their headphones on, they did like the ghost thing, right? Somebody's asking questions and only one of the other guys can hear the answer. It was so simple that it couldn't be fake, right? It was so to the core of what we should do as humans on this earth that it was like, no, this is not sensational. They're not making this up. So it was very, very interesting to go there and be there with them and have that experience there of these young guys truly just kind of fooling around and doing this thing, to where it turned into a legitimate investigation that they did. They went up to what is called the Shaman's Cave and did, a ghost speaking thing. They went in, all the different rooms. And that was interesting. There's something there. What made Bigelow leave there, I think, is a real presence,
Really?
Yeah. And what's wonderful about Mount Wilson being basically the sister site to Skinwalker Ranch is everybody can go there. Everyone's welcome to come there. You can go to the saloon and have a shot with Jeff, and he'll tell you all the stories, right? And it is an incredible place to go. It's beautiful. There is an incredible history there. You can walk all the different sites. You can stay in the room that Bigelow was told, get out, And he's only talked about it once that I know of on a podcast. He really doesn't talk about a lot because he really did kind of tuck tail and run from there. You know, it's like he won't come back to Skinwalker Ranch either.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he doesn't want anything to do with those places anymore, and I don't know why he doesn't. I do think each place treats everybody differently,
Yeah.
depending on what your intentions are. That seems to be the vibe everybody gets of, you know, if you're there to maybe exploit something, you might not be treated the same as someone who's going there to, you know, be there and protect the place or something. It's very interesting. I found that in a lot of the conversations I had with the other team members at on the cruise, on the Skinwalker Uncharted cruise. Very interesting insights, you know, that you don't get when you're filming, right? You're busy filming. You don't have time to just really talk to everybody. And it was really interesting to see the different things and experiences that everybody had. Very, very interesting.
Couple things. When Sam and Colby, you had mentioned there was a really simple message that came through to them. What was that message? That was audible.
I don't know the exact words, right? But it was protect the earth.
Okay.
It was something came through, something in the voice. Me just summarizing it, protect the earth. Right?
Wow. And I know I know those guys as far as their content and stuff, so I get it. They came in kind of, you know, doing the yuckster,
having
guns
fun.
blazing, yeah, and then
guns blazing, looking for what, you know, sensationalism, which of course they need to do that for their audience and everything. But I believe it was humbling to them.
Yeah,
and the film, I thought it was really well done because you saw that evolution literally going on, and I was only involved in a few scenes, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And again, I came away at the end, and people were like, was that real? Because I don't do the ghost
right
voice box thing. I don't understand that part of it. And I just logically, I'm like, well, that's not going to sell tickets, right? Even though, I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and that is what we should do, right? But I'm looking at it as, well, if they were doing this and faking it, right? That would have been, I believe that would have been a different message. They would have wanted to be scared and run away.
right.
And they were not. They were humbled, you know.
The other thing you had mentioned was on the cruise that you're recently on, and people just sharing stories that you wouldn't hear on camera. Is there any, and you don't have to name names, but was there any story that stood out to you that kind of was like, wow, that's somewhat mind blowing, or was there multiple stories like that?
What it was a culmination of everyone's story, that they were all shown different things, and this is very striking. They were all shown what they need to be shown.
What do you mean by that? Like,
I mean, everyone everyone interacts differently with whatever is there, right?
no.
And again, a lot of different stories that aren't my stories to tell, but I think
Sure.
that everyone involved at every level gets shown what they need to be shown to get something that I don't know everyone's getting the message yet of what the message is. I don't know that we know exactly what it is, but that was something that came from all the different stories. You know, I was able to share, because I can't tell the story because it's my wife's story. But I shared it on the cruise, and it is insane.
Where is she? Get her on.
I'd love to, but again, it's a very intimate, very, very private story.
Yeah.
Insanely, what an interaction, you know, the first time I went to Skinwalker Ranch. So something I'm sure we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah, no, that's all good.
We filmed it, but they didn't air it.
Really?
You know, yeah. Just like, you've got the story that Ben Woodruff talks about, or the hawk, that he had that disappeared when he was out there. They didn't show that for 3 years. Finally he's gotten like permission to talk about it and do a presentation that people can find online. He talks about it finally. I was sitting there with him in a truck, and he was telling me his frustration of this incredible experience that he had that they didn't show on the show, and he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't show it, and then to see the relief on his face, because I was on the insiders with him when he got the permission to talk about it, and it was like a weight. It would be the same thing as if, if we hadn't shown what I found yet.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing. That's what happened to him. So there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of storylines that deal with the history, that deal with the archaeology, that are in play to be told. But we're at the will of the industry to tell those stories that will really round off and colorize what's going on there. Everybody's just getting a portion of it, and the unique stories of everyone individual that nobody knows. They don't take time to tell you about Thomas and his history and his life, right? Or Caleb or Travis or any of them, and people that just come on the show and do other things, that do the rockets, that do the drones, all the experiences that they have. There is it's insane, really. Again, everybody gets this much, and there's so much more to it. I have a list of things that I have as an inventory of things that need to be expressed on the show, right? And I'm just waiting for that opportunity. So,
well, is there anything that you can talk about for just personally your experience? Because you don't want to, like you said, that's their stories to tell or your wife's story to tell. Do you have any that you can tell? That it could be one story, it could be multiple.
From the ranch?
Yeah.
Experiences on the ranch? No, I think I've kind of shared, I have what I find things there, right? I find artifacts, and then we do share them, and we filmed about a lot of them that I can't speak of. I have yet to see anything in the sky.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can say that I've been shown material things, right? I'm looking. Right. I'm looking down a lot because I'm looking at the artifacts, but I'm always gazing up for that other thing, to see that. The other sites that have been talked about, we've talked about doing scenes or have done scenes about the Masonic symbol that's there, right? It's much more rich than has been previously discussed. The other, they call it the petroglyph that's there. It's fantastic. So I can tell you at that level, right? You guys know these sites are there. There's so much more to them and to things that have been found previously by people that worked at the ranch that have been brought back, and we're bringing together and finding more artifacts to tell the story of what has gone on there in prehistory. But it is so dynamic and really, really interesting. And I'm hoping because it needs to be out there to be told. It's an incredible place. The history there.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I'm shown. I'm not showing the cryptids or the orbs in the sky yet.
But when you summed it up pretty well, because I was talking with, I think we talked a little bit about this last night. A few weeks back, I spoke with Jim Segala, who he was. He worked with Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis in Texas on these funded studies, and then got involved with Skinwalker. And the first season, he was working with Bigelow, and then once that was sold, I think Brandon said, "Look, you're already doing science here. How would you like to be the chief scientist on season 1?" Mm-hmm. And a lot of parallels with you and him, because he was like, I like to do the science part. It's tough to do it with a bunch of producers around. And he said, what you see is the inference of the things they capture when they capture, but a lot of it is just trying to do the science, right? But he did say the people are what attracts the phenomenon in his mind. It's the people every person in these studies they do, he said it's always they're being told something. They're being shown something or they're being told something. And then from what you just said, that you're being shown what you need to be shown. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody else is being shown, maybe in the sky, what they're either selected to be shown. Maybe we're going to show you this, we're going to show him that. Yeah. And I find that to be pretty darn interesting. Like the why of it too, the why of it. And also the fact that it sounds like you really just scratched the surface. Like this could go on for a long time, or there could be some kind of big reveal, and that's what keeps driving you guys every day, I'm sure, to do it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, my focus went from just inventorying the site of what is there and telling them what is there, right? And telling some stories about the prehistory there, to I want to get in that mesa. That is my goal. I have to get in there and I have to peel it back one layer at a time and see it in its place, or we're not knowing, right? We don't know what it is unless we do it that way. Everybody else has a different aspect. They have their different scanners, right? Or machines, ground penetrating radar, LiDAR, all these different ways of analyzing and getting the data that they know how to analyze, right? And that is like, yeah, Jim Segal, I'd love to talk to him because that's very interesting. Never spoke with him before, so hook me up with that.
Oh, I definitely will. And Jim makes it's called MUPAS, and there's it's an acronym. So what he said is once he wrapped doing the work on the ranch is when he really started to explore the basin, and he was having devices that would correlate activity. It could be hundreds of miles away, or in one case, a device in Oregon from one in Utah that was probably, close to 1,000 miles away, that when they would almost correlate their activity like they were in sync, even though they were the distance. And he just said there's these pockets of areas all around the basin that have this similar activity, and sometimes it'll happen up here, and then it'll go down past a mountain range in the valley and then happen down there and then go on down the line, and it's measurable. So I found it interesting, and he actually has a way to for people that want that equipment to actually have it made and shipped, I think at no cost. So I've got some investigating I'd like to do with that, but it definitely should put you two together. I think you would enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, again, in looking at other places outside the ranch, when you have these paranormal locations, right? Well, you go there to look for the evidence, right? It's like going to a crash retrieval site, right? You go look what's on the ground and see, is there something here that's unnatural or something that affected the natural environment, and look for that. And that's what I would, I like to do. That's what I do with other places, to see, is there evidence of, what we would call this xenoarchaeology, where you're dealing with the strange, or whether it's crypto, archaeology, or whether it's just supernatural. Is there evidence of that on the ground that we haven't seen before? An example of not even realizing what I was doing when I was down, this is on the reservation that's here, years ago, surveying, and found an artifact you would just describe as it wasn't an archaeological site. It was just an artifact, and it was on this really tall cliff. There's just this little shelf, sandstone shelf sticking out about that far, right? And I could see something on it. I walked over to it, and it was a piece of iron, and it was actually like an axe head, and it was wrapped in leather, sitting there. And I was like, well, that's odd. I documented it, wrote it down, took pictures, did the location for it and everything. But I didn't define what it could be. And then years later, when I really don't study it, but now I do, when you're studying Navajo witchcraft and the origins of the curse and skinwalkers and all the whole thing and the ethnography of it, which is really very interesting. Iron and deer hide casts a spell. It is something you use. And that could have been an offering or something, not necessarily dark magic, but some type of native magic that I found out there, right? Not realizing it touched it. But I never applied that
Yeah.
until this time that I'm going, wait a minute, these archaeological sites you find, when they are defined, you might loosely say ceremonial, right? When you've got a big kiva or something like that, but you have habitation sites, you have hunting sites, right? You have kill sites, you have a lithic reduction site where you're making things. You don't go, well, this was the cave of a Navajo witch, you know,
Yeah.
and they were doing spells in here and they were casting evil, and you really don't do that. And so I'm looking back in time going, well, maybe I actually did find some sites like that. Not very far from Skinwalker Ranch, you know, probably, within 5 miles.
Oh, yeah, right there then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just out on the reservation, you know, just out in the middle of nowhere, found that. And I didn't identify it as being something that would be that type of a site. You know, it was very, very interesting. So I've delved into that, you know, into the books and the ethnographies, because they go back in time. And there's a fantastic book that I tell people to read, and it's Witches of Abiquiu, and it is a translation done, I believe, in Mexico. Some people went down, translated old Spaniards, Padres documents from the Genizario in Abiquiu, which were basically Native American slaves taken there and prisoners, right, on all different tribes. And they were taken there and held for centuries, right? I think since the 1600s. In the 1700s is when these journals started getting documented. And there is the first, from what I know of, the first transcription of a padre watching a Native American turn into a wolf right in front of him.
Wow.
And if you read this book, there were all these trials going on. It's basically the witch trials, like the Salem witch trials, but it's the witch trials of natives, right? Where they were tried for this, imprisoned, separated, and they were taught the dark magic by an unnamed Navajo at this prison. An unnamed Navajo taught them, would take them out to a cave that the Spaniards called the Devil's Cave. And it was at this location.
Where
right?
you found...
Where this was... Where, no.
Okay.
Where this was going on in New Mexico.
Okay.
Sorry, this is in New Mexico.
Yep.
It's a long ways away, but that's Navajo country, right?
Right.
That is the earliest description I could find of someone witnessing the transformation of someone into like a skinwalker, if that's a real thing. But it is a real transcript. It's not made up. It's not fiction. And there's ethnography about this dark magic, about shape-shifting. And it's really very interesting. And again, I went down that road to research, where did this curse come from, right? And that's a story that we haven't gone into, and we can. Where did this curse of the Skinwalker come from?
Right. And, you know, the other point I was thinking about is when you talk about a sister location like Mount Wilson, right?
Yeah.
What's the commonality there? The indigenous, it seems like the indigenous culture is common in both areas, right?
Well, it's Paiute there. And this is actually, this is the Ute Reservation, but this was, this was like north of where Navajo was. And you might have Shoshone in this area, and you did have Ute kind of in this area, but going back along, so it wasn't related tribes at all so it's not that, but it is similar in that you have a great Native American presence at both locations for some reason, right?
Right.
So that would take you back to the earth, the energy, right? What was there? What resources were there? And what was there beyond resources, right? Where Skinwalker Ranch really, maybe it would have been wetter, and you maybe had springs coming out at certain locations, certain sites that are there. You do have a river, you have a creek and a river. Near there, you have a confluence of the two coming together. You got a great spring at Mount Wilson Ranch. So there are those resources. But it might be more of the energy of the sites where they were, and maybe they were both ceremonial in that respect, where there's that. But there's something drawing people to both locations, because you do have a lot of locations out there where you don't find any artifacts at all, right? So if you just look at it that way, that no, it might not be. And again, the Paiute being there, and then up here, the tribes that you had up here at the time of us being here doesn't mean that's who was there 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. You had different groups in there, and we don't know enough about those to say if it was, the same or related, because you go back so far and you've only got so much evidence you can deal with and really talk to.
Yeah.
So, but there is a Native American presence at both locations.
If anything, it gives credence to the idea that whatever it is that you're dealing with, the phenomena, the energy, intelligent, non-human intelligence or ancient intelligence, that there's been an attraction to cultures going back thousands of years at these sites. And could that be the attraction?
That's very insightful.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not the smartest guy you'll meet today. I get like one good one per show. So
nailed it on that one. But that's the interesting thing. That again with the show we'll talk more about. And I wasn't sure if I could, but there is a history. There's a big history there that I was able to talk to about on the cruise. So I figure I'm free to talk about it.
Yeah.
I won't talk about specifics on certain things that are the indicators, but there's a history at both places that go back a long time. And again, to have sites that have multiple periods of time where they were occupied for thousands of years is not common, right? You have a hunting site that might be 3,000 years old. You have a Fremont site that might be 1,500 years old, right? But they don't go down in depth, right? If you dig into them, they weren't occupied 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. So when you see that continuous occupation, there's something drawing them to those locations. And so there is, and then drawing modern people there, right? Why you go right on up to the Bigelow period.
Right.
Why was he there, right? What drew him there?
Right.
Pretty strange. And what did they see to keep him there and to make him study these locations and in very weird ways,
And at great expense.
Yeah.
At great expense. These are smart men. Mm-hmm. And if they wanted to just throw money away, they've decided, they know what an investment is and isn't, and they've made the decision to put a lot of money into studying this. So no matter what anybody says, you could say, well, there was nothing there, it's fake. These are smart men, billionaires, putting millions and millions of dollars into something. To what end? There's got to be something there.
Yeah, absolutely, there is, and a lot of it is just written. It's in the history and the prehistory of these places that you can see how important these were over time, even in the historical period in the last 125 years in the West. These areas and the people interested in them, right, and what their other interests are, all culminate together. And looking for the same thing we're looking for, right? The same answers we're all looking for.
Yeah.
And this is like the place where it all is. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Well, listen, before we wrap, a couple more things I want to ask you. And one of them was the guy that walked in and met the caretakers in 2021 to the guy I'm talking to today. How has this work and experience changed you? I've always been into otherworldly or supernatural and all that kind of stuff, played with all that kind of stuff when I was young and wondered about it. This is played into that there is a lot more that we don't know yet,
right? And it's the desire to know. How interesting it is when I look at what we're doing there, and these other locations. It's better than a script,
Yeah.
right? And you can really, it's better than an Indiana Jones show, and all these different stories, because this is real, right? There's something coming out that's real, just like speaking about like the age of disclosure and these people that I talk to, some of them very, very closely. I have intimate conversations with them. This stuff is real. People are putting their life, their reputation on the line for something that is going to change everything, right? And we're all playing a role in this, right? I've found this through this whole thing. Everybody's interacting for some reason that we may not really know. We might think we know, but we may not know exactly what it is. For some reason, for some answer that we all really do want, that there's something more to all of this, right? It isn't just how everyone has it defined with the way the world works, with the way nature works, with the way religion tries to define it, all the different religions, that there's something else there. And it's that answer, I think, that we're all going towards. And a question that I've always had, just along probably with you and everyone else, that there's something out there. And I didn't know that I was going to be involved in trying to figure out what it is, right, at this level. And that's really, really interesting to me, to where, what if there is something more to all this, right? And we're, you as well are part of getting the answer to that, and we're working all together as a team and figuring it out. And again, I'm still at times in disbelief of what has been found, what I have found, what I've had my hands on, because it shouldn't be there. That's just plain and simple. The stuff shouldn't be there where I found it. So it's really, really strange, really interesting, and it is absolutely life-changing. I didn't plan on, even doing an interview like this. I just went there to go do the archaeology and tell them what they got, protect something,
Yep. And here you are. Well, listen, last one. New season's coming out, I think, like you said, in a couple months. And any message you'd give to people that are going to tune into this next season?
But yeah, I mean, what do they say? They have a slogan that they say, wait and see.
Yeah.
But, and you have to wait and see, but watch it, because it's real. Everything that we find on there, and all the activities and all the things they see, is real. And we're all just trying to figure this out together, as a team. And tune in to see. It's really interesting, really interesting. And we're going to get more information, towards our goal, and some incredible things that that I fought for to get, to get revealed. So yeah, tune in for sure.
Awesome. Well, listen, man, I'm so glad we finally got to do this, and I'm honored that I know you didn't do any interviews, and we're basically the first one. So I hope it's not the last. I hope it's not the last. I'd love to do some periodic check-ins, and even connect you with some of the folks I think you'd be really interested in talking to a meeting as well. And so until next time, all the best, man, and keep rocking.
Thank you. Take care.